Agenda today. I just thought we've done about 7 or 8 sessions now. I thought it was a good time to just I brought in a couple different people. And I thought, we generally have pretty small groups for the calls, and then people go back and watch the recordings. So I just wanted to open up the floor for you guys and let's talk about what's on your mind. Let's tackle, there's some complex stuff you're looking at. Let's do it WhatsApp group style. So I think most of the people that show up to the calls every week are pretty active for the most part. So I just thought it'd be a good time to kind of check in and, focus on individual use cases or, whatever you guys want to talk about. So yeah, I didn't come with an agenda today. I can always, whip out some workflow I created yesterday, or we can, work on stuff that might add more value to you guys. So I'm going to look at the chat. Feel free to speak up, but fire away.
Yeah, I can start, Josh. I think during the end of the last call, I asked the question basically I'm going to ask now. I don't know if you remember that, but basically, I see a lot of stuff people posting on LinkedIn about using different triggers and intent data to work that into your scripts or write the angles. But honestly, it just seems so vast that it's hard to know where to start with all of those kind of things. Do you start with a list in Clay and then enrich it, with some trigger platform to try to find the most ideal first line kind of a thing? Or do you start in another platform and build your list from there? So I'm curious if you've done any work there and what approach you would take on that kind of work.
Yeah, that's a fabulous question, by the way, because it's so true. At the end of the day, it really depends on, I think you have to be pretty methodical about things. Like I have definitely been all over the board when it comes to trying to figure this stuff all out. I even kind of have a mantra of when I wake up this morning, what workflow am I going to create and talk about today? So I don't know that I help with not perpetuating that problem, but to be honest with you, Grant, I think, when it comes to client work very specifically, though, I'm pretty methodical. And the way I go about doing things really just depends on, do I have experience with doing that given niche or that approach or not? Often a client will come to me and be like, I have this particular niche. I want to do financial services. This is a real conversation I had with a client a week or two ago. I do recruiting for financial services, fintech companies, Series A to Series D, and I just do recruiting for it's about as narrow as you can get, right? So, I'd done some funding triggers and stuff like that, but that was highly specific, right? So the first thing I did is I started thinking about okay, at the end of the day, how do I find these people? So that's my first thought process. And then, okay, if I can find them, I mean, we all know we can go to LinkedIn and stuff like that, but you can't do, Series A to Series D funding in LinkedIn. So, I basically just started out on a Word document. I started writing down okay, how do I find these people? And what are the requirements for this lead gen, right? And I think you have to know that before you can even start thinking about signal or intent data, right? Because, and I don't know if I've given this analogy before, but I'm going to take a few minutes to give it, is that there are a lot of ways to go about lead generation and outbound, and it doesn't matter if it's cold email, LinkedIn, or whatever. But if you're going to do that, you can do that very, very broadly, right? So the example is you could take and sell SEO services or social media services to any company in America. You could pick a role, let's just say founder or owner. You can blast emails, and as long as you do that moderately well, you're going to get some degree of response, and all of that will come down to deliverability, copy, subject line, how many emails, what your volume is, et cetera, right? And if you do that long enough, you can measure to which degree you're going to get replies and then increase your volume to get where you need, right? And that can get very expensive. It can be very hard. But that's very much a role-based approach, right? Where you're getting that data from Apollo, LinkedIn, instantly, wherever you want to get that data. Or, and this is really where I've kind of shifted my mentality the last month or two, is that it doesn't really matter what niche or what business I'm targeting for myself or for a client. I really truly believe it's a lot like dating. So if I've given this analogy before, I apologize, but I really, it internalized it for me. It's that, like for me personally, if I were to like, I'm in a relationship, so I wouldn't go out and date anyway. But if I was single and I tried to go date someone who's married, like the chances of us having a date are almost non-existent, right? Because they're married. They're not looking to engage with me. If I were to, if I was single and I tried to go out and date someone who was single but had no interest in dating, like maybe they just got out of a bad relationship, then even that holds true, right? Maybe I might woo them over to some extent, but the likelihood of me engaging with any kind of relationship with them just goes down exponentially just because they have no interest, right? I think the final aspect of that is like the people who are purely giving us signals that they're interested in that concept, right? And those are the type of people that we're looking for, right? We're looking for people who are giving us some kind of signal that they want to buy our product, or they want to engage with even the opportunity to be more informed about whatever we're selling, right? So when you're going back to that sending out mass emails approach, when you're going and sending emails to a bunch of founders, you have no idea what category they fall in, right? They could have just done a layoff with their company, and that's all they're worried about for the next 3 months is how to recover from that. They could have just spent $1 million on a product that's very similar to what you're selling, so they have zero interest in that, you know. Or they could be, out getting bids or getting proposals for whatever you're trying to sell. So we have to find data that gives us that indication in some form or fashion that they might be interested in our product. And so I think I give that analogy, Grant, to kind of come back to the point of it's a process, right? And for me, it's the couple things that I'll do is, number one, I'll go on a Word document. I'll just start writing out, how do I find these people? Where is the ideal place to find them, right? Can I find, back to that, finance, fintech, Series A, Series D? Okay, where can I get that data? Where can I get Series A to Series D data? Where can I find, people that work for fintech companies? And so I start to map that out on a Word document. And then once I identify where do I find those people, I need to understand how much that costs, right? Because like I know today I can go to CoreLogic or CoreSignal, for example, as a tool, and it combines LinkedIn data and funding data from Crunchbase. It also has like Indeed data and other sources as well. So I can get that data in this particular scenario directly from CoreSignal, but it's also extremely expensive, right? It's like, I think it's for $49, you can pull 400 leads, right? So that's probably one of the most expensive data sources that I've seen. But in this case, it's a very small niche. It's a very small TAM, right? So it might make sense for me to do that. Whereas if I was back to that social media, I can pull Google business profiles through Clay, enrich them with ICPs, and pay 0.2 for a verified email, right? But I need to have that process mapped out and figure out how I'm going to get to the end result, which is a verified email. And once I've accomplished that, then in phase two, now I need to figure out, like, how do I get indications that these people are willing to buy? So I'll kind of show you like just a quick down and dirty version of how you could do it. And I've done this before too. So let me go to ChatGPT, everybody's favorite friend here, and scroll up here. And so I'm just going to type this out. So I want to send emails to companies who have received Series A through D funding in the last 6 months. Let's see, what else do I want to put here? And specifically fintech companies. How do you recommend I find these companies, right? So, again, I'm all for using tools that we have access to, right? So here's some examples. This is almost similar to what I was describing, right? But look, I can get in Crunchbase, PitchBook, so some of these I'm familiar with, some of these aren't. I'm familiar with Crunchbase, obviously, PitchBook, and then LinkedIn, right? So here's 3 of the 6 that I'm already familiar with. I'd maybe want to dig deeper to see, like, here's an example, right? Set up Google alerts for fintech funding or Series A. So can I recreate that in Clay doing Google searches? I'm not familiar with CB Insights, but that might be something I'm going to be looking into as well. Okay, so this would be one simple process. If I didn't know off the top of my head where I could get this data, one thing I could do. The next thing I would say, so let me type in there. So how can I go about specifically getting this data? So it's told me some websites, right? But I'm going to dive in deeper. And so it's telling me, like, look, sign up for Crunchbase, do an advanced search, fintech, la, 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 PitchBook, etc. So this is a long-winded answer to your question, Grant. But at the end of the day, like, none of us, in your own niche, of course, if you're just doing this for yourself, you're going to get very, very familiar with where to get your data and where to get signals. And you could take this a step further and say, how do I know they received Series A funding in the last 60 days? And we'll just use my recruiter example. And they have an open job, because in this case it was recruiting. Got some kind of error there. But anyway, it's going to tell me, like, here's that. Really weird OpenAI error there, but it's going to take that even further, right? And say, okay, so in this scenario that I'm describing, right, I have companies that meet my criteria, and then the signal I'm looking for is that they posted a job. And so I've now combined those 2 approaches to say, here's the leads that I want, here's the signal that I'm looking for. And so in that general premise, you just have to take that and extrapolate that to your particular situation. And it can be much easier in Clay if you're looking for things like store leads data. You're looking for news is a great signal. I just talked with a client today who's scraping Clay data, Google News into Clay, and using that to find leads. But it's the combination of, are they the right lead and they fit in the category that you're looking for, which creates better opportunity for you. And then secondarily, what is the event that is happening, or what is that signal or trigger that is giving you the idea, or at least giving you the impression that they're ready to buy? Like, that those people that you're willing to date, they want to date, much more likely to get a date versus the other 2 categories. So hopefully that helps, Grant. Did that answer your question? All right. Let's see. I'm looking through the notes I saw. Okay, so yeah, so Jesse asked, and I think it's a great question. It says, I'm trying to create my AI outreach machine, and there's so many videos of relevance in Clay. It's easy to get overwhelmed. Is there a place to get started? And, it's very, very true. So it's there, there's really not, like, it's the hard part. I spend most of my time when it comes to Clay, honestly, just building stuff, right? Like, I go in, I try stuff, and that's how I learn. I've had some conversations with Clay, especially recently. There's Clay University and there's Clay Docs, and both of them have different approaches. Clay Docs has some videos in it, but it's more of like step by step. Clay University is more like just videos and use cases. They're well aware that they need to improve that, and they're working on that right now. People like me and other experts, we all kind of post things that are all over the board. Um, Relevance, I think, has a better, honestly, they have a better like training section in there that I followed along. I don't, Jesse, I wish I had a better answer. None of us have taken the time to really build like a formalized training program or anything around it. But I know it's coming because I'm a part of it. So they're definitely working to improve, and I'm working with. Yeah. Anybody hear me? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I don't know where I cut off. Sorry, my internet connection went down. But the just kind of stressing for everybody that we're working to make that clay training material better and that the docs better, but it's still a work in progress. So more to come on that. All right, what else?
I have a question. This is just like a bigger picture thing that I'm thinking about for my consultancy. So we're doing basically essentially like embedding AI and directly into the sales process of the companies that we're working with. So one thing that we're looking at is like the bigger picture, being able to process, huge amounts of data, right? So we're talking about processing a bunch of intro calls and then trying to like take out findings for those intro calls in this industry versus that industry, and then have that influence strategy or playbooks, kind of the idea of like taking a Moneyball approach for sales, right? Versus just saying, hey, here's what our VP of sales thinks, or the people who designed our playbooks, but actually letting the data talk and like comparing that with conversion data. So this is something I'm thinking about at like a really big picture size. And I'm trying to think about how to structure the back end of that so we're actually still getting something useful out of it, right? Because it's a lot of data. So you're going to have the larger sets of data that you run through a single prompt, the less that you get out of it. So I'm just thinking about like how many levels of disconnection where you're kind of pre-processing it, one to get like the top 10 takeaways from a particular call, and then putting those top 10 takeaways with 100 other top 10 takeaways, and then running another prompt on top of that. And then like at what point are you actually losing the uh the value, right? Where you get so far from the original text that you're actually not able to take that. Now, obviously, I have a feeling GPT-5 and the continued stuff of like Gemini 1.5 is a massive context window. But I'm just trying to think about like the large picture conversation. Maybe Josh, how you're thinking about that, or if you're thinking about that when you're thinking about using this and being able to institute this at like a macro level for you know um, companies and sales operations.
Yeah, I mean, I actually spent a lot of time thinking about it. I think, you kind of have buckets of data sets, right? So you have what we call like structured data, right? And that's going to be your tables and stuff like we do in Clay. And then you also have your unstructured data. So, let's just say any of your docs that you might be scraping, stuff like that, right? So, images, videos, and stuff. And, from a data warehousing perspective, I think you're we're all going to want to have at some point, whether that's directly integrated through cloud, calling like OpenAI's API or other APIs, et cetera. A repository for those data warehouses, however we organize them, structured, unstructured, that it's built in such a way that it has that real-time API capability in streams, much like a Snowflake is a good example of a data warehouse that's like that, where you can store data in those type of environments. And that's, a lot of the larger corporations are using AWS, Azure, Snowflake to build out those types of environments. I was in the corporate environment in the early days of when GPT launched about a year and a half ago. And we were starting to build, those specific infrastructures of cloud environments, because the amount of just pure compute to some extent of what you're talking about at that scale, Dominic, is it can get messy really, really quickly if you're just trying to run multiple clay tables over and over again, and the output of that clay table being fed. Like I don't see, at least at its current state, like clay being that tool to help really focus on, like, I don't know that clay is yet there to handle that type of true infrastructure completely, right? I think it's more segmented, where you're connecting tables to databases and you're connecting individual tables to individual, access points within a cloud environment. But I would almost say, much like with the previous example, Dominic, it's like before you start to build too quickly and build out different tables upon tables, it's just being very intentional about structuring and mapping and kind of organizing your data, almost like Adam showed last week, because you could very well get into a situation of data overload, or to a situation where you don't know what the right hand is versus what the left hand's doing, and what are the structures of how that data flows from one table to another, or into one GPT to another. But it's a real legitimate focus point, because I personally believe what's going to happen, especially in the next 6 months to a year, is that GPT and both, at least OpenAI and Google specifically, are going to introduce agents at a mass scale. Right. Today we're talking about relevance. We're talking about variations of autonomous agents through Clay, where essentially even today you could webhook data into a Clay table, have it do 10 things, and push it out to an API. I mean, that is essentially an agent to some extent, right? Because it's taking these different tasks that can be disparate, built individually, call a GPT, run a LinkedIn search, whatever, connecting them in a flow, and then spitting that back out. I mean, that by all intents and purposes is an agent. May not necessarily be conversational, but it's an agent. So I personally believe, like, GPT, some version of GPT-5, or like you said, Gemini Pro, Advanced, one of them will in short order release an agent, and it will be some form of a tool where you go into it, you put in your 4 or 5 API calls that you want to connect your data sources to, much like you can do today in Relevance, and it's going to autonomously complete tasks, right? And I think there are tools out there that can do that today, like Relevance, but it's in the best interest of Google and Microsoft to make that easier for people, right? And I think they will. Every indication is they will. And that is when this is going to be real, because then corporations, larger businesses, are going to make decisions of whether or not they can put together a team to build 25 agents that can download PDF documents and attach them to CRMs and all the different things that today people are doing to some extent, that can now all be done with AI. And then data is going to be their issue, right? It's not going to be that the tool can't do it. It's going to be, how do I connect the data to the tool? What happens when the tool completes? Does it log a record? And I think, I don't know that I have all the answers, Dominic, but I think it kind of comes back to, as we start to prepare for that, and as we start to see tools that can do that, Clay is a great example of that. Relevance is another. Again, OpenAI is historically known for knocking out 1,000 startups every time they release a new model. And so it's a perfect opportunity for them to come out and they're all marching towards AGI, right? Which is true, AI, human intelligence. So I think that's what's going to happen. And I think the way that we prepare ourselves for that, or we evolve to that now, is very solid, intentional organization of our data warehouses and our data feeds, and then mapping that out so that we know the input and the output of that, and doing that like in a graph format, where we can see, like a visual. You can even do this like an not Outlook, but PowerPoint, where you're showing step by step, visually, how that data is flowing. Almost like you can kind of see that in the Clay graph function if you're ever in Clay. I've shared some of those, where it shows the flow of the data, but really doing that at a larger scale for all of your tables, is how I would do it. I know it's kind of all over the board, Dominic, but hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that was helpful and interesting. Thank you.
Mhm. What else, guys? Anybody struggling with anything particular workflow wise, or just lead generation as a whole, or Clay, or instantly Smartlead, relevance, anything specific anybody want to ask? Okay, well, I'll make one final call and then it'll be a nice short one today, but we still got a good 30 minutes in. But any final questions?
I don't want to like I'll keep going, but I don't want to
No, keep
monopolize
going.
this time. So
Go for it.
yeah, I mean I mentioned this I think in the WhatsApp group, but we've been really struggling with outbound email, and I feel like there's like a lot of different theories about like what's going on, what's working, what's not working. We've had a little bit more luck. It's interesting with clients, right? Because I don't necessarily want to blame their value proposition if there's something larger that's happening. Just thinking about like how to manage that. But I guess there's not a great question here other than, you know, is there anything that you've picked up from the last like 2 or 3 weeks that have been which have been obviously kind of very intense and a lot changing and rebalancing that's around like best practices that you're seeing that's kind of leading into around email deliverability specifically, or anything else that you think might be useful just from that you've seen?
Yeah, and this is all just my personal opinion, so take it for what it's worth. But I mean, one of the reasons why we use AI solely with our copy is because it creates, I mean, in every single email we send, Dominic, we have 2 paragraphs of highly personalized, unique content for every single lead. And so how Spentax works, if most people don't understand this, is like every word within a given email, if you're doing Spentax, creates a variation of that email, right? So let's just say you have 25 Spentax variables in an email, then you're going to have, every word times itself. I can't do the math in my head, but it's a whole lot of variations of that email, because any one of those 25 words can change at any given time. So each word is associated with 24 other possibilities times however many words. So it's a lot, right? So the point is like, 2 paragraphs of high unique information creates like 150,000 combinations of what that email could look like. So when you do that in every single email, you are now becoming exponentially more normal to Google and Microsoft than you would be if you're sending the same copy over and over again. So that is the number one reason why we use AI. It's taken us a lot of time to get very good at making sure that it's professional, it's relevant. But the number one reason why is because it helps our deliverability. And like I try to preach this as much as I can, but cold email is 100% about you appearing as if you're sending an email like any other small business in the world that uses Google Workspace or Microsoft to send regular everyday emails. That's why we all have warm up pools and we do warm up. That's why we try to limit sending value. But we're all also marketers and we all also want to make money, right? So it's like, let's try to shove as many emails out as we can a day. Let's try to take our version and our perspective of why our product is so awesome and tell everybody else. And I think that model is continuously proving that it just doesn't work anymore. I mean, that's my personal opinion. It's well known within the industry that Microsoft, especially Microsoft in the last 30 days, is going down the route of Zoho. So if you guys have been done this for a while, you may remember a while back, year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, Zoho went from everybody's preferred platform to basically saying, if we find a warm-up email, on your account, then we're going to ban you. So they started just killing everybody's Zoho accounts. And so I feel like from what I'm seeing and hearing from some of the other experts in the industry, that Microsoft is starting to go that route. Microsoft is not one of those companies that generally small businesses go out and get Outlook accounts, right? That's really where they go for Google. Your general small business in the US, they'll go get Google Workspace accounts, right? So Microsoft is more enterprise, more mid-sized business like, and a lot of companies that use Microsoft for email also use things like Proofpoint technology and front end tech that detects phishing accounts, right? So, like some of these large corporations, like the one I used to work for, I mean, I don't know if I've shared this before, but like I was pretty high up at a Fortune 500 insurance company, yet 4 times a year I had to do a phishing test, right? Where they sent me this email that looked like it was real, and I had to like mark it as phishing, and it was completely random. And a lot of times they were actually pretty good; they were written pretty well. So all this is to say that my personal opinion, Dominic, is Microsoft and Google, and I may have said this before too, but Microsoft and Google are the two biggest investors in the world right now in AI, right? We're all using their tools. I mean, arguably Microsoft, doesn't own OpenAI, but they got $10 billion invested in OpenAI, and they're incorporating it into every Microsoft computer in the world through Copilot. Yesterday, they just launched a Copilot computer, which is built off all GPT's technology. And then Google is Google, right? And Gemini and all the different models and cloud and all that they're doing with AI. They haven't figured out search yet, but they're even putting a lot of effort into AI and search. To think that those two companies, which is where we send all of our outbound emails to, and we send them from, haven't figured out how to detect cold email when even people on this call are sending the exact same email 25 times a day. It's just naive for us to think that. Like, you have to create, warm up is no longer good enough to create uniqueness, right? Like, even warm up is sent at 20 emails a day, or 25 or 24 or 23. There's an interval there. I would bet almost everybody in this call, me included, if we were to go into our email campaigns, they're all set to 25 a day or 30 a day or whatever that number is. And they don't change every day, right? Like, it's not 30 one day and 27 the next and 26 the next. And then if you have 3 email accounts on one domain, all 3 are sending exactly 25 every day. Like, those are all highly detectable and predictive patterns that I could build a model in GPT right now to determine that I was sending cold email, right? It's just, so to think that these corporations that are really, really good at it and probably can put very little effort into figuring out that we're cold emailers, that's what we are up against, right? So I don't know what the solution is. I know what's working for me is to use 1 or 2 paragraphs, no sales, spam, anything in the email, all plain text, no links, and hyper personalized, and relevant to the person that I'm reaching out to. And my domains have been fine, right? Taking that approach. The people that I continuously and get feedback from that are struggling, a lot of it is repetitiveness of the same copy over and over again. going out, lack of personalization. And then I think I heard something the other day from the founder of Smartlead, and I thought it was just absolutely brilliant. And I never even thought about it, but I think it's absolutely true. Is that like if you send 1,000 emails out and you only get like 3 replies, is that normal? Right? If you kind of go back to the principle of like it's our job to look like normal businesses sending normal emails, right? That's it. Anything other than that, then we must be cold emailers, right? So if you create an offer today and you go and launch a campaign and you only get 3 replies, that's not normal. Like a normal business sends out 1,000 emails to customers and coworkers and everything else. They're probably going to get somewhere in the area of, I don't know, a lot more than 3 out of 1,000, right? So part of it is that we have to be just really intentional about our lead targeting and our offers because um, like after 30, I personally believe after 30, 60 days, you send 1,000 emails on an account, you get 2 or 3 replies. Like you're in the bucket, whatever that bucket is, the spam bucket, the block list bucket, whatever. And people just aren't seeing your emails. And so they're still going out and your health score looks great and Insta or Smart Lead, but they're just not getting there and you don't even know it. And that's kind of the problem that I think most people are seeing. It's not that they're seeing like there's domain list tracking, IP tracking, there's spam tracking, there's all these different trackings you can get. But I do believe there's this black hole where emails just don't make it, and Microsoft and Google don't let them make it, and it's just because we're not matching the patterns of normal senders, right? So, I mean, what we're going to have to continue to do going forward is be exponentially more diligent and copy creation, targeting the right audience, lower sending volumes. Again, everything I'm saying, there's a use case to prove otherwise, right? I have a client that sends 50 emails a day, includes links in every single email, and it's got a 10% reply rate, right? I help them manage the campaign and write the copy, but I don't know how they do it. Like it's all algorithmic and there's no perfect science to it, but generally speaking, the solutions are send plain text, no links, lower sending volumes. And then probably the most important thing we can all do right now is have domains and email accounts sitting in warm up that you're not using so that when an account goes down, you're not out for 2 weeks, right? Like today you can go into instantly and buy a domain for $15, buy 3 email accounts for $5 each. So $30 one-time cost, $15 ongoing cost, and make that investment now, let it warm up. And then if you lose a domain tomorrow, then you just substitute them and you lose no productivity. But that's my approach. So that's long-winded, but hopefully that helps. So a couple questions. Do you include an unsub link? If so, how do you list? No, I don't. So I don't include the link itself. That's not actually a legal requirement. You just have to give people a way to unsubscribe. So I write it in text. I very intentionally put it about 6 or 7 sentence spaces below my signature. And I've used different approaches, but I'll say most of the time it's reply no thanks. If you don't want to hear from us further, if you're not interested or something like that. That's my most common line. The reason why, and again, it's just my personal belief, but I like the polite professional approach, and I think no thanks or no thank you is nice. I also think it like sends normal keywords to Google. Like, I personally believe Google, Microsoft can see everything we're doing and algorithmically very easily detect what we're doing. So I don't like to use the word unsubscribe because unless you're sending cold emails, you don't use the word unsubscribe. So I use like just that sentence, Grant, where I'm like, if you don't want to hear from us further, just please reply with no thanks, and I put like no thanks in parentheses. And then the most important aspect of that, as far as compliance, is when they tell you to stop emailing them, you stop emailing them. So I add them. My team adds them to the instantly block list so that we don't hit them again. Where do you stand on warm-up reply rates within Smartlead? I've been told anywhere between 20 and 100. Yeah, so no, I think around 75 is a good number, is what I use. I think 75 is a good number. I think anything above, so, and the same thing applies with instantly, right? So reply rates I have set to 75. I don't remember about Smartly. I know in instantly I use pull from spam 100. And then on mark important, I have that about 15%. I can't remember if that setting is true in Smartly, but I definitely know reply rates in Smartly have around 75%. Um, I do think to your question, and Dominic asked, like, if we set them to 100, could that turn around an email? It could. So one of the strategies I've used, and it works really, really well, is that have intentionally inflated warm up. So you can up your warm up volumes in Smart Lead or instantly to try to recover an account, and that will work. But just make sure you don't send on it, right? So just take an account. If you have an account that has gone to crap, take that account out of your sequences, max the warm up. So in instantly, there's actually a button to max the warm up, and then just let it run for 2 weeks and watch it and come back and test it. And there's, maybe we should do in the future, we'll do a class on like domain spam IP monitoring, but you can often go back if you don't touch those accounts and don't use them and just let them warm up for a while, they will recover. But just make sure you maximize the warm up when you do that. No, you can't buy domains through Smartlead as of yet, to my knowledge. You can through Instantly. If I were buying domains for Smartlead, I would go to, my personal opinion is I would use GoDaddy. They seem to have the highest sender reputation. Namecheap is definitely cheaper, but I do use Namecheap if I'm like buying a domain for like a business, but not for cold email. So for cold email, I use GoDaddy, and I've bought all my accounts from GoDaddy up until this point. Now that Instantly is offering, I'm probably going to buy some through there just to test them. But GoDaddy is about $11.50 per .com domain, and then also for email accounts, I use a company called Inboxology, which is run by Moen. He is also an Instantly partner like I am. He's set up probably 400 or 500 different accounts for me at this point. And so they go in, and the reason why I use them because they are an official Google Workspace reseller, which there's very few out there. And so they have a relationship directly with Google, and then they do all the setup and mapping to Instantly or Smartlead, and they're $3 per account. So I'm not telling you to use Instantly or use Moen or use anybody. This is what I do. So
Josh, what was the
and
name? What was
then
the name of that one again?
Inboxology.
And did they do like they set up like the DKIM and DMARC and all that stuff, or do you have to do that all?
Yeah, no, they do it all. So you basically, they give you a spreadsheet to fill out. You have to purchase the domains, but then you fill out the spreadsheet with the domains, the naming convention, like, Josh at Content Marketing Media, Joshua W at. So it takes about, depending how just recently did 60 domains, 180 email accounts. It took me about 30 minutes to fill out the spreadsheet, and that's it. You just send it to them, and then they're going to do all the DKM, DMARC, SPF, all that. They'll do the 301 redirecting, or 30 whatever, to redirecting to your main domain. They do all of the mapping to Instantly or Smartlead and the setup, and basically you're left with your accounts warming up when they're done, and they do it in about 48 hours, and it's $3 per Microsoft or Google account. I personally would not buy any Microsoft accounts at the moment, but if you choose to, it's $3 a month per account going
Are
forward.
you worried about like any of the reseller stuff with them where it's been challenging and they're all kind of using like these old, I'm not sure if that applies or not, but I've been a little bit worried to not set up my own domains because of some of what I've been hearing about people who are buying from resellers or third parties.
Yeah, so like I'll answer that. I love to answer questions with data, Dominic. So I'm gonna answer that question with data. Give me just a second here. So this is a new launch that I just did. I think I've made a few posts on this the last week or two, but so all of these accounts that you're seeing right here were all bought through them. There's 180 of them, and they were set up starting on April 29th. I did let them warm up a little bit longer than most people do. I did like 6 weeks just because we were waiting to launch the sales team. But these were all bought through them, Dominic. And I mean, this campaign is, I launched it on last Monday. So it's, I don't know, 10 days old. And this is the result. So I would say that's the best way I can answer the question. This is all these domains were bought through GoDaddy. They were all set up through Inboxology and seems to be working just fine for me.
Do you have to buy the domains yourself on GoDaddy and then just put them into the spreadsheet, or do you just say the names that you want and then they'll actually just do all the purchasing?
You have to buy the domains yourself.
Got it.
And then you will give them, so like for instantly you give them access, or Smartlead, you give them access to your account so they can do all the setup and the warm up and everything for you. And then you give them like GoDaddy access so they can do the, all the domain DNS records and all that stuff.
Could you give me a link to their site? I was trying to find it on Google and I saw like 5 things. Okay. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll pull it up here. Let's see. I don't know why I can't pull it up either. Here it is. I think that's it. He just switched domains, so that's why it used to be Demandology, so maybe that's. I'll just put this one in there because I know they're working through both. But yeah, and if I don't normally make product recommendations, guys, but if you want to check them out, if you go to Instantly's page, they're an official Instantly partner as well. So that's the only reason why I send references, and I personally use them for my account. So I am, just to be honest, for convenience purposes, because I'm sometimes lazy, like I am seriously going to be buying domains and stuff through Instantly too, just to see, because that process is actually a little bit faster and easier. And if you need 10 or 5 and not 100, like I sometimes need, like it's okay to pay I don't mind paying the extra $2 a month, right? So it's just all about convenience and everything else. Yeah, so Grant, I didn't see that. I saw the preview of it. So do you mind taking a second, just sharing like what you saw? Because I haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet.
Yeah, sure. I don't have a screenshot, I don't think, or anything of it, but I can drop the link in here of what if I can find it. Maybe I didn't write it down. Oh, here it is. So if you go to this link, this is the link that Microsoft will tell you. It's like a Defender product. You have to pay like $3 per email account, but they will tell you where your emails are landing. They've got like a whole graph on it for like every day that you send email, how many emails you sent, the bar graph shows, 300 of them landed in normal, 3 of them landed in junk, 4 of them landed in or were blocked or whatever. So I guess Jesse Owett found this like this last week, and he's been really like hyping it up and keeping it under wraps. And then they they showed it on the Smartlead call this morning. And I mean, obviously, a lot of people are pretty stoked about it because so far, in order to see where emails are landing, you've had to rely on a tool like Glock Apps or MailReach or Folderly to kind of guess what the reputation of your account is with the different email service providers. But with this product, you can actually see, where all the actual Outlook to Outlook emails are landing. So that was pretty cool. And then the other thing that Jesse and V talked about, I can't pronounce his first name, so I just call him V.
Yeah,
the founder of Smartlead. The other thing it talked about is setting up webhooks from your untracked replies in Smartlead and using ChatGPT to analyze the error codes coming back from your Gmail responses. So, if it says this email was not delivered because of, 550 dot whatever. And then like basically creating some kind of database, in Google Sheets or, Airtable or something like that to analyze, which email accounts are those error codes going to, why are they bouncing and all that kind of stuff. So the bigger one was the Microsoft piece, but the less sexy one, but still interesting, was the workflow of analyzing your Gmail error response codes. So that was kind of what the whole call was. There's like 45 minutes of questions too, but it essentially all boils down to using those features to see where your emails are landing, and then doing all the standard things to improve your deliverability, like having good copy, targeting the right people, using a good setup infrastructure process where you're not fingerprinting yourself in the same browser 5,000 times and things like that. So yeah, anyways, any thoughts?
no, that's phenomenal. I mean, I know. So, and I would tell you, like, V and I are kind of going back and forth trying to find a time because I'm going to bring him on because he's just such a dynamic. They have over 1 million accounts in Smartly. You guys didn't know that, right? So, him and I chat back and forth because we're both data guys, and he loves to look at data. So, I'm trying to get his schedule where he can fit into the 2 times that I have a week. But he's going to get on. I'm going to get him on here
Nice.
just to kind of have some of these questions. But like one of the things I would say, like, I know we only have like 6 minutes left, but like if I can stress anything is that there is no absolutes, and you'll hear V say this a lot. There's no absolutes in this business at all, right? Like it's the core fundamentals haven't changed. And, at the end of the day, like you have to think about it from an economic perspective. And I love this. I think V said this, or maybe Jesse said this, or another guy that I'm in a group with that was talking with V said this, was like, they're not going to shut you down. Like Microsoft might shut us down, but Google is not going to shut us down. Do you know how much money they make from all of us? Like, as much as they don't like cold email and they make it hard for us, it's a lot of revenue if they decide they're not ever going to allow it again. So part of this is like playing by their rules, right? And I don't know if you guys remember back in February and March, they came out with all these new rules about how many spam emails you could get reported a day. And it took them like 2 weeks. And the backlash they got from people, they removed all those rules, right? Like they originally had like, I guess if you get like more than 3 spam reports per 1,000 emails, they were going to block an account. And they went back and pulled those away. They took them away because they were getting so much backlash from the cold email agencies. Because I mean, we're all not multi-million dollar. I'm not a multi-million dollar corporation, but there are multi-million dollar corporations that are doing this at scale, right? So that being said, you're right. They would definitely rather shadow ban us and keep the revenue, and they're perfectly capable of doing that. But the important part is like stick to the fundamentals of writing good offers to relevant people. When you start blasting out emails to everybody and their brother, they're going to figure it out. And there are more and more tools that are going to come online. that are going to give us the ability to analyze our data. This is just a great example of that. But the general premise of, just sending good emails and trying to make sure that your behavior in a cold email mimics a human. If you stick to that, yeah, you're going to burn domains. I mean, it's inevitable. If you do this at any kind of scale, you're going to burn a domain. But just have one ready, so you're not down for. I mean, I've been in a situation like 4 months ago where every one of my workspace accounts hit spam. Like I went from 30 replies a day to one. And I'm like, I didn't change a thing. Like, what happened? And so I just started testing and testing, and every one of my workspaces were hitting. When they hit a workspace account, they hit spam. When they hit a Microsoft account, they hit delivery. So I'm like, what did I do? What did I change? And I remembered that I went in and it was so insignificant that I didn't think I changed anything, but I italicized part of my signature. But that's HTML, right? So the second I checked the no HTML box and instantly and started sending again. Like I was hitting inboxes, and I knew because you can test in Smartlead instantly, you could send emails to yourself. So I sent them to my own workspace accounts, and I could see they were hitting inbox. And it's just little things like that it's going to happen. But and we're going to figure out different ways to track it. But I will tell you, like, I'm in a group. I may have mentioned this before. I'm in a group with probably 40 or 50 of the biggest names in this industry, right? That do this. Some of these agencies they're the biggest names you see on LinkedIn. Most of them are in this group, and they make a lot more money than I do doing this. And some of them I'm really good friends with. And they will tell you, and this is the same thing I'll tell all of you, right? Is that if you stick to the fundamentals, you don't get caught up in the latest gadget that comes along, supposedly is going to make everything this much easier when it really never does. And just stick to the core fundamentals, relevant offers to relevant people, and trying to do that at the right time, then you're going to have fluctuations along the way, but you will continuously figure out how to hit inboxes. I mean, you got to monitor your domains. You got to have a backup plan. You got to try to get, better and more relevant in your copy to the right people. But the premise of it hasn't changed. And I think that, at the end of the day, what I've learned just paying attention to those guys, they're having the same issues that we've talked about today. Like they're seeing their inboxes go down when they've had great campaigns. They're seeing campaigns go from 5-10% reply rates to 0.5% reply rates overnight. So it's not any one of us, but the whole system's not dead, right? They just have contingency plans to say, okay, well, and don't get caught up in the mail forge and the mail doso and all the different SMPT, unlimited account. Like my advice is like stick to the core fundamentals, like with anything else, and you'll persevere, because that's kind of what seems to be working through this unlimited, plethora of new things that comes along almost every week with cold email. Yeah, so this is a great question. It's a great one to end on. I always ask, like, when your spam score looks fine, but you're not getting any replies, how do you know to axe an email or a domain? And like, that is it for me. Like if consistently I'm getting some level of replies from email accounts and domains, and then all of a sudden it just ends. If I didn't change anything, if I didn't change my leads and I didn't change my copy, then the only thing it could be is that domain. Now I'll run tests on it. I'll run a test on the domain, see if I'm hitting block lists and stuff like that. But even that, like if I, let's just say I'll pick 3 or 4 days. If I go a week and this campaign has been performing well and I've changed nothing, and all of a sudden I stop getting replies, that's, to me, that's enough of a signal, like to swap it out. Because now oftentimes when you diagnose this with people and I ask questions, it'll be like, well, I changed the, whatever, I went from this to this. And then I'm like, well, okay, well then it might not be the domain. But if all things were equal, right, you have to go with what, obviously changed, which had to be the domain or the email account. So All right. Well, I got some good speakers coming up from Instantly and even Smartly and some other sources in the next few weeks. So excited about that. But great questions today. I know it's a small group, but I love the very specific questions. So appreciate everybody's time. Have an amazing rest of your week and weekend, and we'll see you next week.